Hi, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Truthful Ministry Podcast. We are here again with part 3 of our kind of little Advent foreshot of Advent podcasts. Last time we did joy, and so this time we'll be on peace. And if you remember, too, at the end of joy, one of the verses I even used, I remember, was like it had peace in the name. Because I was like, all these things kind of go together. It's almost like it works out perfectly like that way with love, joy, hope, and peace. And so Cody is going to kind of lead us in talking about peace today. And I will say, too, just some other things that have gone on in our lives. Like, it's been a little bit stressful of a week, like with building a new PC for me. Cody's been just an absolute saint in that, and his willingness to serve and help me build a new PC and like all the troubleshooting that comes with it. And then, again, not being in like the normal location, I've been like forgetful and I forget things. And then today I forgot like my notes, but at least this time I brought my laptop. So we've been all over the place, but we just had food over at your house. Your wife cooked up some delicious stuff. And so I've got that like post-food like comfort right now.
Yep.
I'm excited to do this. I feel like I'm able to focus. Last time I was getting hungry.
Yeah, I was pretty hungry.
I was getting pretty loopy hungry last time.
We got done.
So we're locked in. So yeah, we'll get her going here. What do you think, Cody?
Well, I guess just, you brought up just has been a bit of a hectic week or so, and just has been some stressful stuff in there. Like, since we're talking about peace, what about having a hectic kind of stressful week like that makes it more difficult to be at peace? Like, was there anything with that? Because for the audience, like, basically, we built you a new computer, and it was just having a lot of technical issues, and I went over there and built the computer and didn't have a lot of time to troubleshoot a lot of the startup stuff. And so you're kind of on your own for several days with that. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to come over Friday, just a few days ago, and work out a lot of the kinks. And so it's a bit smoother now.
Right.
There's still a couple of hiccups, but it's a lot more usable than it was. But just kind of like, since that's top of mind, what about that made it a bit more difficult to be at peace? What do you think?
I historically, I'm very much so an overthinker. I'm like an over-preparer. Like if I go like on a trip, I'm packing like way more than I need to usually. And like with that, like I tend to go to the worst case scenario.
Right.
Like I'm a worst case scenario on the brain person. I honestly think last week and like the couple weeks like since we built the PC, I've done pretty good compared to like what past me may have done. But it is like tough to. I have to like actively tell myself like, don't think like, what if the PC explodes? Like, what if just like literally everything goes wrong? What if I have to return everything? We like spent some money on it. What if just everything goes wrong? What if nothing works? And what if this happens? And like I just get down this like this train of thought, like a literal just chain one after the other, where I let myself descend into like everything could just go horribly wrong. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think one thing that I did well was just thinking like. I think we even talked about it maybe on the last couple podcasts. And if we didn't do it then we've talked about it just in person, me and you talking about the concept of like, God's got me this far. Yeah. Like I can be kind of upset about like my PC not working. And like, yes, even in that worst case scenario, but it's just like, I'm going to be alive. Like God's going to move like a couple years from now. I'm going to look back at this and laugh about, dude, do you remember when my PC was struggling? Like, it's just going to be a funny story. And so I was able to find like more peace in that. But just the uncertainty of like what could happen. I spend a lot of time thinking about the what could happens. And so I probably do it to myself and make myself a little more anxious and make things a little more hectic for sure on my end.
Yeah. We'll circle back to that kind of more towards the midway point, towards the end of this. But on the flip side of that, Johnny, then, since we're talking about peace, like when you think of peace, like what comes to mind for you? What's, you hear that word, what's the first like use of that word that comes to mind or definition or something?
I think of, it's weird because I think of being able to be alone and like just kind of not have worries about responsibility. But I also think for me, I'm a very social person, and I think I find a lot of peace when I'm just like hanging out with friends. Like I would consider what we just did like 20 minutes ago like super peaceful. Yeah. Just like sitting around a table with food and like your kids making funny noises sometimes, and we're just like eating and talking. It's like it's peaceful. Like we're not worried about anything. We're not like doing taxes. It's just like us hanging out.
Yeah.
So I feel like my ideal peaceful day would be that perfect mix of like I wake up, I do my own thing for a while, I can sleep in, so I don't have to worry about being late somewhere because
Right.
I'm late a lot. But then like maybe toward the middle of the day, like somebody comes over, we eat some food, and then they go home, and I get to just like get in my PJs, and there's just I guess a lack of like responsibility. Like peace is just like I don't need to be anywhere, I don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do whatever today.
Yeah, the problems of the world are not on my shoulders right now, kind of thing. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like for me, what comes to mind, like I picture a scene. I do that a lot with these kinds of questions of like,
Yeah.
I have a picture of what that means, and I always go back to like, as a youth minister, like, you know, when you do like summer camp or something like that, or anything like some kind of camp thing with youth, that's a chaotic experience. There's
Right.
a lot going on, and you're exhausted all week, and it can be stressful at times. But also, you know, if there's one thing that you can count on teenagers not to do during summer camp, it's get up early. And so, like, I can remember times as a chaperone or as a leader for like summer camp with youth, getting up early, and kind of getting to sit outside, like if we're in a cabin or something.
Yeah.
And, you know, take my Bible and go sit outside, and just kind of like the sun's just barely rising, and you can hear the birds chirping. And maybe it rained last night, so it's a little dewy, and like it's just, you know, like a comfortable kind of like temperature. And I just have some time where like the stress and the craziness of the day, I know it's coming, but it's not here right now. And it's just me and God, and like I can just go to him with my stuff and spend some time with him. Like that, to me, that kind of vibe is peaceful. I also think of like driving.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people hate driving. For me, depending on the drive, sometimes driving is stressful.
Right.
But like, you know, if you got a nice chill drive, and like sometimes I'm listening to worship music, and I can just kind of pray while I'm driving, or like I'll listen to an audiobook. I do that a lot when I drive, and just to kind of zone out a little bit and just listen to my book. That's peaceful as well. So yeah, peace in the Bible then is used in two ways. In the way that we just talked about it is one of the main ways that it talks about it. But before we get to that, there's a different kind of peace that has to come first before we can have that second kind of peace. And the first type of peace that the Bible talks about is having peace with God. And so we pick up in Romans 5:1 as, to me, the prime verse for explaining this. In Romans 5:1 it says, "Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ." And so in the book of Romans up to this point, like chapters 1 through 3, some of chapter 4, in Romans, you have this just this idea of we are sinners in rebellion against God. We're at war with him. We are born into the enemy camp, in other words, and we're born in rebellion against the King of the universe, and so we're at war with him, and rightly so. God is waging war against us, and he's angry with us, and so we should be fearful of him. As our pastor, we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon. That's what our pastor was preaching on this morning, was you know, the fear of the Lord. But Christ came and he entered in to offer a way for us to be at peace with God, right? He extends his hands to us, the rebels, and offers peace and reconciliation, and invites us to rejoin God's kingdom. And so this ends the conflict. We were rebels against the king, but now we're at peace with God the King. And that's something that the Bible makes pretty clear that you want. So Johnny, why do you want to be at peace with God? You're sharing the gospel with someone and you've presented it that way. Like, you can be at peace with God. And they're like, why do I care about that? Like, what would you say?
Why do I care about being at peace with God? I honestly would think about like what our pastor this morning about like the fear of the Lord, and just like why do you want to be at peace with like your dad? It's because like, yeah, your dad loves you and like your dad isn't out to hurt you, but like you also know like you might get a whooping. And at the same time, I want my dad's help. Like I don't want to be separated from my dad because like I call him if I get a flat tire. I call him if I need help for whatever. Like I want to be at peace with my father who created me. It also just feels like the right thing to do. Would be like the probably where I would go is just like if I believe that someone like took the time to create me and to love me and to give me the gifts that I have, it almost feel like wrong to not like give back like you fixing my PC and stuff like that. It'd feel weird for me to just be like, cool, I don't care about this guy. But it's like you did all this stuff for me. Like how would I not like desire some form of like friendship or peace between us after all that you've given me? Those are probably the two things that come to mind first.
Yeah. To me, I think of it more in terms of like, um, you know, if God is our enemy, what chances do I stand in winning that fight? Because that's kind of the way I feel like initially the Bible presents it, because you have in the garden, right? The devil, the serpent tempting Eve is saying he doesn't want you to eat from that tree because then you'll become like him. Like almost like presenting it as if you eat of the fruit of the tree, you'll become a rival to God. And so what the rebellion against God is, what that is at the core is saying, I don't want God to be the God of my life. I want to be God. And real God is in the way of that. And so, if it comes to blows, I guess it comes to blows, and, we'll see who wins. And that's kind of the way it works. And obviously we lose that fight, right? Because he could totally, absolutely crush us. We don't stand a chance of winning. That's even the way in Revelation is presented. You have this scene. It's early-ish in the book. It's in the first half, where like it's the seals are being opened and all this judgment's being poured out, and you have this scene where it's like the people will hide themselves in the clefts of the rock, trying to hide from the wrath of God, and they'll say, "Who can stand against this?" And the answer is, ain't no one.
Right.
Except then this in the book, this is what I love about Revelation. The scene shifts and it answers the question. Like it says, John looks and he sees the multitude of the saints, and says that's who. And it doesn't have to say it explicitly, but it's written poetically. It's like, who can stand? Those who have made peace with God. Those are the only ones who can stand in this day. And the fruits that are born of being at peace with God, one of them is when the day of the Lord comes, I don't have to be on the wrong side of King Jesus, because that picture of Jesus coming in Revelation, that's one of my favorite descriptions of Jesus in the Bible, just as like kind of a fantasy nerd kind of guy. It's the most metal description. Jesus coming on a white horse, a sword coming out of his mouth. He's got like his angel army behind him, and I don't know. It's just cool. But you want that Jesus to be on your side in that moment. You don't want to be the army that's like, all right, let's go to war with the armies of heaven, and that Jesus shows up the front of the host of heaven, and you're like, well, I guess I think I picked wrong, right? But that's where we're at before Christ. Is we're saying, God, listen, you want some, come get some. And God's like, you don't want this. You don't want the smoke.
Yeah.
And he gives us our life as our opportunity to take it back, essentially. It's like we've laid the gauntlet down with our sin and rebellion, saying, God, you think you can throw me into hell? Try me. And God's saying, let me give you a chance. But man, you really want this. Like, if you go your whole life rejecting me, rejecting my offer of peace, it's not going to stand forever, because you're going to die one day, and then you're mine. And it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of an angry God. So, like, both of those, I think, are elements of, like, why do we want peace with God? One, because we're chalked otherwise. Like, what option do we have? I think of Peter in the Gospels as well as a similar kind of situation when Jesus says, you're gonna have to drink my blood, um, to be saved. And he has this whole giant crowd following him, and they're like, Jesus is talking about some weird stuff now. I don't know. This isn't really what I was into.
Right.
Like, I just wanted to see Jesus do some cool miracles. And so, like, everyone leaves. And I love this part. And Jesus turns to his disciples and he says,
You want to leave too, or something like that? Yeah.
like, are you going to leave me as well?
Yeah.
And Peter says, to where else will we go?
Yep. I
You
love that
alone
one.
have the words of life.
It took me a second to remember what you were talking about, but yeah, I know exactly what script. That's John chapter 6, and it's verse like 60 through something.
Yeah. And it's like, that's what it is. And in one sense is like, where else can we go? Like, there's no refuge to turn other than God. And we're at war with the only source of peace available to us in life. We gotta fix that. Like, that's a problem. You gotta deal with that before you can get anything else. Like, I'm a sinner and I deserve to be crushed for my sin. And praise be to God that he sent his son to make a way for us to have peace. And all I have to do is stop living in rebellion against God, which I already am wanting if I'm at that place anyway. Like, I don't want to be in rebellion against God anymore. So you just make that commitment and then accept Christ as your king, and you're good. Like, it's as free an offer as there is. And just the cost of it that God took to make the way. Like, God bore the cost. So we want peace with God, and you have to make peace with God before you can have the second kind of peace, which is the kind of peace that we tend to talk about more, that we want, is just peace in life. And that's in Hebrew, that word shalom. Funnily enough, my son's name is Solomon, and I've been taking Hebrew in seminary. So I finished up my first semester of Hebrew. I'm taking a second semester in the spring. So I've been learning a lot of Hebrew words, and I was just curious. It's because there's a lot of words in Hebrew that once they get transliterated into English, they don't, like, you're like, how did we get this? Like Jesus, for example, in Hebrew is like Yeshua.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get to
How do we get
Jesus
there?
from Yeshua? Like, and so I was curious, just Solomon, because that's named after King Solomon. Like, what is that in Hebrew? And it's shalomo, which is really funny. Shalomo, little shalomo.
Yeah.
But that's that word. The root of Solomon's name in Hebrew is the word shalom, which is peace and prosperity. So he's literally, like Solomon in the Bible, David names him the Prince of Peace, which is one of the names for Christ. Anyway, diving down a rabbit hole there. But shalom, this idea of not just peace, not just like things aren't going to go bad for you today, but also like flourishing. Right? It's something that you would say to someone like shalom. Like, it's almost like a saying, blessing be upon you. Or I hope things go well with you. Shalom. I hope that your day doesn't have bad stuff, but instead has good stuff.
Yeah.
Shalom is what Christ offers us in our hearts. John 14:27, he says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Don't be troubled, don't be afraid. Have shalom instead. Being at peace with God is the only way for us to have peace in our life then. And that's really what people are looking for. Like, when I think of like evangelistic methods, sharing the gospel with people, that's one of the key kind of hooks
Right.
that's often taught for sharing the gospel is like, you're at a coffee shop with someone, you're having a conversation, and they just start, telling you like, man, I just got laid off my job, and like things are tough, and blah, 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 whatever the problems are. And like, that's your opportunity of like, how are you feeling right now? Like, do you feel stressed? Do you feel like, what do you want? You want peace, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus is the way, and so you go in there. And Jesus makes it pretty clear in this verse what kind of peace he's referring to. It's the lack of anxiety or worry. We are content and secure in life. That is peace. And so kind of going back to what you were saying at the beginning with your answer, like about the computer stuff, like part of the main thing really that steals peace from us is anxiety and worry and like, you know, stuff that's out of our control, that we want to have in our control. You know, it's like, is the computer gonna blow up? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, no, but like, if you're worried about that, like why are you worrying about that? You know, and part of it is because like, you know, I'm the one that built the computer because that's not your skill set. That's one of the few skills that I have to bring to the world. And so like when I'm not there, if you have a problem, you don't really know how to troubleshoot it. And so like I was getting lots of texts for multiple days of him trying to like tell me what's going on, and I'm like, that's not enough. That's not clear enough information for me to know exactly. And I wouldn't even know how to communicate to you about how to fix that. And so it was like, I'm just gonna have to come over and do it. But you know, also like my wife can be pretty anxious. Like I can't tell you how many times we've left the house and she'll be like, did I leave the oven on?
Dude.
And I'm like, Courtney, you didn't cook anything this morning. Like what? Like we had cereal this morning.
My
or
mom
whatever.
has done that my whole life. Maybe that's a woman thing, low key. Like obviously, like all people are anxious, but maybe like women specifically about like the home. Because my mom would always say that stuff like that. Like, did I leave this? Did I turn this off? Like, did we forget to lock the back door? Just stuff like that. And it's like that wouldn't have even crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about whether or not I locked the back door. I never would have thought about if I left the curling iron on or something. Like, never would even. Like, as soon as I'm in my car and I'm driving, I'm done.
Yeah.
So.
And it's almost like it's almost a control thing. Like anxiety is a desire to have control over something that you don't have the ability to control. And so it's like, if she's at home and she's like, did I leave the oven on? She can just walk over there and check. But if we're in the car leaving, it's like, if I left the oven on, there's nothing we can do. And what might happen? The house might burn down. Oh my gosh, our cat's in the house. The cat's gonna be consumed in the fire. And like, what if the fire causes our neighbor's house to catch on fire? And you know, and this is like, you know, what if the entire town catches? And it's like you can just keep going.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of that is in your hands. And so, the kind of shalom that Christ offers speaks into those kind of anxiety or worries, right? He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let them be afraid. So, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but can you remember a time in your life when you were the most at peace like this? Just worry-free? Like, are there different seasons in your life where you can think of like, man, that was the most peaceful period of my life?
Yeah. I often think back to when I was planning the first Fields of Faith at Kentucky Wesleyan. Like, I still chase that feeling sometimes of, I feel like I just genuinely, like you were talking about in Sunday school, the concept of like hearing from God and stuff, and being in prayer and like being in your word so you can feel like you hear from him. Like I found so much peace because I think that was the closest to the Father I've probably ever been, which in a way it's like obviously a shame to say, like I haven't been able to pursue or like deepen my relationship enough further like since, but man, like my whole goal was to just plan this like amazing ministry event.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, man, I mean, it was just a gift from God. Like I wasn't as anxious about it as I could have. Like there was definitely parts of me that were nervous about like, okay, I have to make sure that this is going to be there at this time. I have to make sure I have volunteer and all that kind of stuff was normal. But like, I don't know, in terms of the overall event and how it was going to go, I like wasn't nervous really. And I was just so in prayer. And it just felt like, man, every time I did have a question or something, I'd be in prayer about it and be thankful for it. And then like God would just, there's an answer. Or like there's a solution to your problem. And it was just so quick. And it just felt like somehow like all my worries were being taken away. Like even though, yes, again, I had the normal like, gotta make sure I do everything right. Like it wasn't like I just got to sit back and God was moving and, you know, I was in like one of those Wall-E chairs. If you ever watched the movie Wall-E, one like everything was being handed to me. Like I was still having to do things, but I mean, it was just like I didn't have any worry in the world because it was just like, oh, God's just like present. He's just showing up. Like I'm not in control of this event at the end of the day. Like I can do my best to plan it, but just like God's either gonna pop off or he's not, and that's cool with me. I'm just gonna keep doing my part, and like, man, it was just so smooth, and it was like it affected my whole day. It was so cool.
Yeah.
There was like a good couple months probably where it was just like so smoothly in the process of that event and planning and it forced me to like be more in my word and to pray more, and probably all came together for that. But yeah, very peaceful time in my life. Just college, no worries, like not worrying about the future, and just, man, I'm just gonna try and plan this good event because it was also my senior year, and my last semester. I had already taken. This is probably a good part of it too, low key. I had already taken all of my required classes,
Yeah.
but they basically were like, "Oh, you don't have enough hours to graduate." I had taken every required class, so like they technically could have handed me a degree, but there was like an hours minimum. So my last semester, I took painting, I took history of rock and roll, I
Nice.
took like a bunch of meme classes. The only real class I really had was I had to do my second semester of Greek, but it's like I have one real class. The rest of my classes are like memes, so it was just like easy breezy. Like I'm not worried about the future. I'm not worried about classes, man. I'm just gonna like go hang out with my friends every day and like pray and read my Bible, and it was super smooth, very
Nice.
peaceful time.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I could give so many answers to this question. I feel like generally I'm a pretty chill dude.
Yeah.
That's one of the gifts that God has given me that I'm thankful for is just I'm a pretty anxiety free person, and that is from God. But one of the periods I guess I would say of extended just like, man, I just don't have any real stresses, real worries, was probably the couple of years right after I graduated high school. Like it was just me, um, you know, I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a kid yet. And those are all good things, but those are, once you get married and you have kids, even before that, when just getting married, like now you've got not just you that you're responsible for, like you got to look out for your wife. You have a family to take care of. So there's some added weight there. And I didn't have any of that then. And like I didn't have any bills really. Like I had to pay for
Right.
my car and stuff, but like, I still lived with my mom at the time, and so I wasn't even in school for those couple of years. So like I was literally just vibing. Like I was
Yeah.
just had a couple of years there where I was really plugged in at church. We had a nice college ministry at the church I was at. I had opportunities to teach and preach regularly with the youth ministry, and so I was preaching every Wednesday with the youth. And so I was getting to like exercise these skills and pursue preparing for this this calling that God had put on my life, and so that was good. That's probably the first season in life after I'd become a Christian where I had made like really good like friends that were like my age. That I still have friends with those people, and so that was really sweet. That was a period of time where I started like going from like elementary age Christian to like time to grow up.
Right.
And so that was just a really cool season of life of like figuring out the well really is just as deep as you're willing to go when it comes to God. Yeah, it was just good. And a lot of that was just not just I didn't have responsibilities or problems. Like if I
Yeah.
really went back and looked, like I could probably think of all kinds of things that like were worries and problems and stresses during that.
Right.
What made them they didn't overwhelm me. They didn't have any power over me. It was like I had a lot of car problems during that time because I had like a cheapo like
Yeah.
first like starter car that was a piece of junk. But like it didn't stress me out because I knew like worst case scenario here, I have to just call some friends to get some rides till I save up and get a new car.
Yeah.
Like the world's not gonna end or whatever. But also like that season, I was able to just, and you were saying this too, just draw near to God and just be in God's presence and like, I was trusting Him easily because I was close to Him and because I wasn't pursuing all these other things. My mind wasn't fractured with all these different responsibilities and worries and things. It was like it's just me and God. And so, like, when I think about what it looks like to try to embrace this peace that Christ offers, Jesus explains it in Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm going to read this. It's a bit of a longer passage of Scripture, but I go back to this passage of Scripture all the time. I mean, we've talked about it on multiple occasions. I don't think there is a word in the Scriptures that are more powerful to me like as far as just like here's some wisdom about how to have shalom in life. So in the Sermon on the Mount, we pick up chapter 6, verse 19. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And so he says here, essentially, like, if the things you treasure can be taken from you, then you're always going to have worry in life.
Yeah.
Because you can lose everything that you treasure in value. So don't store your treasures. Don't treasure things that can be taken from you. Treasure that which can't be stolen from you. Treasure that which is in heaven. Treasure me. Let me be your treasure. And before I keep reading, I'm reminded of there's this study done, this like psychological study done on like the victims of the internment camps in World War II, of like the Holocaust survivors. And there were some that like they were able to, despite just the wretched state that they were in, just the absolute horror that they were experiencing, there were some that were able to cling to like their sanity, basically, like to not lose hope and just keep pushing forward. And like I can't remember the name of this person that did this study, but like interviewing survivors, the consistent theme with those that were able to cling to it is the thing that they hoped for to see again, the thing that they treasured, was something that the Nazis couldn't take from them. Right? So like the people that like the thing that they cared most about and valued the most in life was their family. The Nazis could take that from them. And so when the Nazis took it, it crushed them and they had nothing left.
Right.
But you had those that, their main treasure was their faith in God. The Nazis could do whatever they want. They can't take that from them. There were one that stuck out to me was like there was this guy that like he had a dream to like own a bakery, and it's like that was something that the Nazis couldn't take from him. Was this dream that he had, and he's like, if I can make it out of here, I can still pursue that. But I mean, that's really what Jesus is saying here. Is like if what you treasure is something that can be stolen from you, it will be taken from you at some point. If the thing you value most in life is your children are going to grow up one day and move off. It's just what happens. And you might even still be in contact with them, but it's not going to be the same kind of relationship as when they were your kids living in your house. It's going to be a fundamentally different relationship at that point. And that crushes a lot of people. And so like, love your children, obviously, but treasure them in the Lord, right? And then, they don't become an idol. They don't become this thing that you're trying to control. And then you just ruin it anyway. Maybe something that you treasure is your wealth. Your wealth's going to be taken from you at some point. You can't always have it. And even when you do have it, you're going to be constantly worried that it's going to be taken from you.
Yeah.
But if what you treasure is Christ, and Christ first and foremost, it will never be taken. You never have to worry about losing it. And this is what Jesus is saying, kind of picking up in verse 25. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life?" I love that. It's like, what are you gaining by all this worrying? It's like, you're gaining nothing. And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. I kind of quote that last one to my wife a lot. Like, let tomorrow's troubles be tomorrow's troubles. Let's just focus on today.
Right.
But when I read that for the first time, that section from the Sermon on the Mount and understood it, transformed my life.
Yeah.
Just that idea of God knows you need this stuff. Well, you think God's not going to provide it? He's going to provide it. Just follow where he's leading you, and he will provide it. Right? It's like the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. Right? Whenever God sends the manna down, and he says, gather a double helping on Saturday, or gather a double helping on the day before the Sabbath, and on the Sabbath, don't collect anything. I'm not going to give you food on that day. I gave you what you needed the day before. And yet they still go out and are like, oh man, I'm worried. And it's like, why are we like that? Why do we not believe God when he makes promises to us? He's told us, if you follow me, I will provide for you. And yet we're still like, well, I want to go to church regularly and faithfully, but my job keeps scheduling me on Sundays, and I'm worried about if I stand up and say listen, I'd like to have Sundays off because I'm a Christian and that's important to me. What if I lose my job? How am I going to provide for my family? And it's like, what is God calling you to?
Yeah.
Do you think that God's not bigger than that?
Yeah.
Do you think God's a liar? That he's promising to provide for you if you trust him, and then he's just gonna gotcha, pull the rug out from under you? In my experience, I've never been let down when I've trusted in God. And even now with my family, I've got a wife and a child to look after. I still I know there's stuff that is stressful, and it's it can cause worry, and it's maybe I should get another job, and it's I won't be able to go to seminary anymore if I get another job, but I'd feel more secure financially if I was getting more income. It's no, God's called me. He's calling me to seminary very clearly. I need to finish that, and I need to trust him to provide for me in the meantime. And he's never failed me before.
Right.
And if we can just embrace that truth, that brings true shalom of just, I know God's got me as long as I'm with him.
Yeah.
If I try to push back against where he's leading me, I shouldn't be surprised when I'm not experiencing his provision, because he put it over there and I'm trying to go this way.
Yeah.
It's I'm running away from the provision.
I was thinking this morning about, there's a song that's like, why would he fail now? He won't. The chorus is just, he won't fail. And it's just that whole song is just I've found joy in chaos. I've had peace that makes no sense. All this good stuff's happened.
Yeah.
So it's why would God fail me now? And I even think about I think we even talked about this in one of the recent podcasts, the concept of how people say blind faith. And you're it's not blind. I have the word. I go to the Bible and it's Abraham takes Isaac up to the top of the mountain, and Abraham's probably thinking, what am I doing? Why? I would feel a lot more secure if I wasn't going to go sacrifice my son, but what does God call me to do? And it's God provides.
Yeah.
God provides every time. You read scripture, God provides.
Yeah. And so what Jesus is essentially echoing here is the wisdom of the Old Testament, right? You see I won't read the whole thing because I already am talking a lot, but Proverbs 3, you could just read on your own, 1 through 12, but I'll just read 5 through 8 here. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. And what that's saying is essentially, when you're worrying, when you're anxious, and you're not trusting in God, what you're saying is, God, I know that you said you take care of me, but I don't trust that you're capable of it. I have to take care of myself, because you're not wise enough, you're not strong enough, you're not capable enough, God. Only I am. And what you're saying, there's just so much just pride in that we have to let go of. So, I guess just in closing here, we're recording in our youth room, and one of my youth just popped in randomly. It's Sunday afternoon.
Guest star.
That was funny. But just in closing here, just to kind of land the plane, when it comes to laying down that feeling of like, God's not big enough to handle this, I have to handle it myself. What's some areas in your life that you have the hardest time laying that down and trusting God?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing we've said it a couple times, like I think just the future in general, particularly like income, job, like wife, housing, things like that. And I think one, it's kind of like our age group for sure, because like we're the post college, like all right, you're expected to kind of move on now. But I also think just in our time that we live in, like this culture is very like, what are you gonna do? Are you not like making money today? Are you not out grinding? Like you haven't already gotten married, you haven't figured out your life plan, you haven't figured out your 401k, and that stuff kind of gets shoved on us. And so it's very difficult to turn off all that noise from the world and just be like, well, God's got it.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do when your parents even are the people asking you, like, what are you going to do? You're like, oh, God's got it. It's like, it's hard to tell them. We're like, what are you going to do when if you're like in school still, like your professors, your advisors, maybe even your friends, like the people all on social media that like you follow and they're like in your favorite movies or whatever. And they're all like, what are you going to do? Are you figuring it out? Like, have you figured out your future? Like you're not married, you don't have a house, you don't have a job with like a 6-figure income yet. Like you should be doing these things. And it just gets overwhelming. And it gets hard to just say like, I'm just going to try and be obedient and feel like I want to follow God and do what he wants me to do, and he's going to be in control, and I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. I think from just a young age, it's like you should be focusing on tomorrow. You should be focusing on tomorrow, because what are you going to do tomorrow? Well, like, what are you doing right now that's going to build up what you're doing tomorrow? And I love like the beginning of that Matthew 6 passage where he's like, moths and rust and thieves like could all come.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that you're trying to build up for tomorrow, it's like it sounds kind of good in the short term to be like, well, hey, if you do this and you invest in this property and you buy a home here and you do this, like one day, like in 20 years, you're gonna have a nice little bank account. It's like, cool.
Yeah.
What about 70 years from then? It's like, I'm gonna be in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I would just say the future is probably the hardest thing to try and lay down and just be like, all right, God, here's like my future plans, because I don't really have a problem. Like in school, I never really cared about like grades, other stuff like that. Like I've shared that my story before was I was really concerned about like popularity and things like that. But once I came to God, I kind of put that away too. I can't really think of anything else other than like I feel like in a way too. You were saying like you're a peaceful person. I feel like I for the most part am, but my weakness is certainly like, what am I gonna do with my life? Like what's my job? What's my housing? Am I gonna be able to provide for my family? That sort of thing really is probably the hardest thing to lay down.
Yeah, and I love what James says to the world pushing that and poking that, and he's like, "What is your life?
Yeah,
you're a mist that's here one day and vanishes tomorrow. Like, who do you think you are that you can know and plan for the future? Like, you don't know what's gonna happen,
right?
And that's kind of what I always think. Like, what are you, like, what's your ambition? And it's like, what's the purpose of ambition? Because I don't know if I'm gonna be alive tomorrow. Like, I don't know. I don't know what God's gonna do tomorrow.
Amen.
We pretend like we have control over that, but we don't at all. So that's one. I think for me, I think it's appropriate that we both say like, I mean, we are Christians. Like we should be rather peaceful people. But I think one for me that I struggle with at times is like dealing with my sin. Is like I can feel a lot of the times like that's fully my responsibility to overcome my sin. That like, if I screwed up, I screwed up. And like, I fell into this sin because I wasn't doing enough stuff to like be sanctified fast enough. Like if I was doing the right stuff, I would be getting sanctified faster. And I wouldn't be making these mistakes. And having the humility to acknowledge and accept that like the Holy Spirit's the one that is the primary driver in my sanctification, and trusting God to take my sin in his timing is hard for me. Because there's stuff I'm like, I just want to be done with this. I don't want this temptation in my life. I don't want this struggle in my life anymore. And if it's still there, it's because there's something wrong with me. And there's something that I've got to be doing to, be sanctified faster. Because I see other Christians now struggling with this in the way that I am. So it's my fault. And admitting that, like, no, I mean, in part perhaps, but like, God is the one driving my sanctification. When I pray for deliverance, God is faithful to deliver me in his timing. whether in this life or the next. Like eventually, it's guaranteed. This sin's gonna be done with. And so, just being patient with God on those kinds of things is tough for me. But as we, wrap up here, I pray that you have peace. Whoever you are listening at home, or you're driving your car, maybe you're on your way to work, or you're driving home from work, or this will come out kind of around-ish Christmas time. A lot of people traveling for the holidays, and that can be stressful. Just know that God has you, and just trust Him, and embrace that peace that He's offering you, and see if God will keep His word. Put Him to the test, and God will, He passes 10 out of 10 times when it comes to the peace department. So that's what I've got for peace today, Johnny.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, yeah, I think he wrapped it up pretty well there. So we'll catch you. We got one more in the Advent. It'll be Love next week. So join us then. Hope to see you back.